Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. It's Science Fiction Saturday once more. And I've got two movies from the 1950s for you. One from 1957, one from 1958, both starring the same actor. Can you figure out who it is? No, you can't, because it's Forrest Tucker. The second movie I've got for you has two names. The Strange World of Planet X, but in America, it was called Cosmic Monsters. And to be fair, the American title is a little bit better. So let's get started with The Abominable Snowman, because Nigel Kneale is a writer of science fiction and fantasy, mostly science fiction, who has a killer reputation. He did the Quatermass movies. He did The Year of the Sex Olympics. He did The Stone Tape. He did that series Beasts. He is one of the greats of mid-20th century English science fiction, and doesn't get anywhere near enough love for it because he didn't work in a literary form for the most part. He worked on screen. In fact, both movies have two titles. The Abominable Snowman is the English title. In the US, it was called The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas. And in some other markets, it was called The Snow Creature. And then The Strange World of Planet X, which is the English title, was in the US known as Cosmic Monsters. And for me, Cosmic Monsters is a bit of a better title, to be honest. So this is one of those rare occasions where an American title for a film not made in America is the better one. So let's start with The Abominable Snowman, because it starts with an A. This one was done originally as a television play for the BBC, a year before the movie was made. And the television play had a killer cast. Most of the cast was the same. Peter Cushing was in it, playing the same character, Dr. John Rollinson. But the trapper and expedition leader, who became Tom Friend, the character played by Forrest Tucker, was actually played by Stanley Baker. And if you ask me, and this is just my opinion, 68 years later, get a choice of having Forrest Tucker in a role and Stanley Baker in a role. I'm going Stanley Baker every single day, even though Forrest Tucker, as all Hollywood gossip fans know, had an enormous penis. Which is not to say he's bad in the role. The story is pretty simple. Dr. John Rollinson, played by Peter Cushing, and his wife Helen, and their assistant, a guy called Peter Fox, played by Richard Yetis, who got a lot of kind of bureaucratic roles in later times, but in this one he's playing slightly different. They're a guest of the Lama of the monastery of Rongruk up in the Himalayas, and they're doing a botanical expedition. They're looking for rare plants that might have medicinal uses, a very, very honourable thing. But a second group turn up at the monastery, led by Tom Friend, played by Forrest Tucker, and they have a different agenda. They're going up into the Himalayas to capture or kill a Yeti. Now, you've got to remember, this is the mid-1950s, and the Himalayas were really big, and the idea that there were Yetis in the Himalayas was really big. Edmund Hillary said he found evidence of one when he climbed Mount Everest with Kensing Norgay. A lot of other expeditions went out looking for Yetis, and the consensus of opinion these days is the footprints they found were basically human footprints. But because of the weird way that light and sunlight in particular works in those kind of conditions, the footprints became bigger as the sun melted snow in particular areas because of the declivity of the human footprint, all that kind of stuff. But in the 1950s, people believed in this stuff. They believed in a lot of weird things in the 1950s, manifest destiny, Christianity, all sorts of things. But Tom Friend's expedition sends the spidey sense of John Rollinson's wife, Helen, played by Maureen Connell, tingling. Maureen Connell, by the way, was an actress who ended up marrying John Gilliman, the movie director who eventually directed things like the 1976 King Kong, amongst other things. But I digress. The Lama is warning them off, and the Lama's not giving them a lot of help, because the Lama knows more about the Yetis than he's letting on, because he's a Lama and by that very thing mysterious. Kind of reluctantly, but he secretly wants to. Rollison decides to join Friend's expedition to go higher into the Himalayas and to find Yetis. They find much more than they really, really wanted to find. One of the people in the expedition is a guy called Ed Shelley, played by Robert Brown, who went on to be the second guy to play M in the James Bond movies. He's a trapper. They also take a photographer along with them and a Sherpa guy called Kusang. I'm going to do spoilers for this one, but I'm going to do them after I tell you about the making of the movie. The movie had a lot of second unit stuff up in the snow of the Pyrenees, so they sent a bunch of lookalikes up into the snow of the Pyrenees to shoot second unit stuff so that they'd have some really good landscapes and things for their movie. They didn't send the stars up there because sending stars to locations was really expensive in those days. It still is, but movies make a lot more money. So they sent the second unit up there to hobble around the top of the Pyrenees in winter, do a lot of, falling down snow and all sorts of things like that. And then Val Guest, the director in the studio, had a hell of a time matching up the studio shots with the second unit shots that were filmed in the Himalayas. But he managed it really well. The shots work out well. And all through the movie, I was wondering how they got the snow that they used in the studio. And then I did a little bit of a shallow dive into Google and found out the snow they used in all of the interior studio shots is a combination of styrofoam and salt. First thing I thought was that would sting your eyes. The second thing I thought was it would spike my blood pressure enormously just being in that room. It works surprisingly well. The combination of styrofoam and salt looks a lot like snow. It works really well. The movie has some pretty good production values in spite of the relatively low budget. The sets they made, particularly for the temple, were made with Buddhist monks' approval. They got Buddhist monks in when they were doing the set building to okay the set designs for the temple. So that was a big plus. And that wasn't something that was commonly done for a movie of this type. And they also had a lot of Chinese actors playing the Himalayan people. Yes, I know the people of Nepal and Tibet aren't ethnically the same as Chinese, but they got close. And the way they did that was they hired a whole bunch of waiters from Chinese restaurants around London. And they also got one actor who's got a speaking role, Anthony Chin, who went on to have a career as a character actor well into the 1980s. And because this is a Nigel Kneale script, we get a bit of a backstory on Friend. He wandered around after the war. He became a smuggler in Europe and then went on to be kind of a big game hunter and trapping animals for a living. And now he's got this expedition to Tibet. At first he thinks he traps one, but he doesn't. It's actually just a Himalayan mountain ape that they trap in a cage. And the ape is not particularly happy about that. All of the expedition goes to sleep in their tents and the wind's blowing. And then they hear something yelling and then the rending of the cage. So the cage is torn apart by something. And that something is Yetis. The cage is torn apart to free the ape they had trapped. And then things just keep getting creepier and creepier. And here's where the spoilers come in. So if you don't want to hear them, don't. It becomes obvious that the Yetis are smarter than human beings. They can make you see and hear things that aren't really there. There are telepathic powers. And they're also enormous. They actually kill one of the Yetis. And the thing's 10 foot tall and enormously muscled and much, much stronger than a human being. And obviously much more resilient. It lives naked in the snows of the Himalayas. And there's a lot of dialogue around where Rollison and Friend talk about the nature of the Yetis. And Friend comes to a hypothesis that they're a different species from the great apes and the humans. There's a third path that the Yetis are part of that evolutionary ladder. It's kind of a good guess, but I've been looking things up lately because I always do. And one of the things we're finding out just this very year is that at one stage in the past, there have been 12 different human species in our world. And as far as anyone can guess, we're the only one left. So I was buying the Yeti. I really believed in the Yeti. We get to climax where things go belly up and we actually see a live Yeti for the first time. And it's got wise and compassionate eyes. It's not a monster. It's something that's very unknowably intelligent. And it comes into the cave where Rollison is. And we only see it from like there up. And it doesn't look human. It doesn't look hostile. It doesn't look monstrous. It's an alien species that we can never truly know. And Rollison has posited an idea as well that what the species of Yetis, who he believes are very, very long-lived, are doing is waiting for the human race to destroy itself so that they can walk the earth once more. This is 1957. That's a pretty bloody profound idea for a science fiction movie of the time. And I'm counting it as a science fiction movie because it kind of sits between a whole bunch of different chairs. But it works well. The movie works well. It's a Nigel Kneale script, so there's always going to be that twist and that wow moment because we always get that with a Nigel Kneale script. And Forrest Tucker is brash and dangerous and is out for the money and is very focused on getting what he wants. He's that kind of aggressive American that people who aren't from America don't like. And I think Forrest Tucker does a good job of portraying that character without making the character at all caricature. It's interesting this is a Hammer film that doesn't get spoken about more, maybe because it was made in black and white. And it was, from everything I can find, Peter Cushing's first Hammer role before he did Curse of Frankenstein. And that makes it really interesting. The fact that it does have a very different ending. It doesn't have an ending where the monster gets blown up or killed and falls off a cliff or anything like that. Well, the monsters, as the movie suggests, are the human beings and not the Yetis. Every brutal thing that happens in this movie is instigated by a human being, not by a Yeti. And I kind of like that. I think it's a really fascinating film from that point of view. So that's the first of the two movies. Now, Forrest Tucker made 3 movies while he was in England in the 1950s. He made The Abominable Snowman, he made Cosmic Monsters, and he also made The Trollenberg Terror, which I've talked about on the channel before, so I'm not going to go over that. So good on him. I think he's a more interesting actor than Brian Donlevy, who played Quatermass in a couple of Quatermass movies. I think Brian Donlevy, who shared a fondness for alcohol with Forrest Tucker, couldn't plausibly play the scientist. I don't like his Quatermass one tiny bit. But in the second movie, Strange World of Planet X, also known as Cosmic Monsters, he plays a scientist. And he plays it reasonably. You can believe that this guy went to college and learns things and follows the scientific method. He plausibly portrays that. The other thing about this movie that I found kind of interesting is everybody chain smokes all the way through it. There's so much nicotine poisoning in this movie. It looks a bit over the top from a modern point of view. And unfortunately, Forrest Tucker, when he eventually died of lung cancer. Cosmic Monsters. We're going to call it Cosmic Monsters because it's a shorter title. According to Wikipedia, a monomaniacal scientist creates ultra-sensitive, disruptive magnetic fields which have unexpected side effects. They attract UFOs, and in fact, a UFO crashes because of these magnetic fields that are being created in the lab. And blasts of cosmic radiation penetrate the Earth's magnetic shield, the heaviside layer. And insects and spiders mutate into giant flesh-eating monsters. And also, people who are affected by this turn into homicidal maniacs, just as a side note. So you got a lot rolling into this movie. You've got freak storms, blasts of cosmic radiations. You got a crashed UFO and an alien from a UFO who comes down in response to that. You got giant insects and you got people turning into homicidal maniacs. That's a lot for a 75-minute movie to carry. But this one does. It was directed by a guy called Gilbert Gunn, which sounds like an anti-aircraft weapon but isn't. And it stars Forrest Tucker, a French actress called Gabby Andre, whose voice is dubbed because she didn't speak English very well, and a character actor called Martin Benson. And people with a keen eye will also notice in the pub scenes that the lady in the pub, Mrs. Tucker, is played by Dandy Nichols, who went on to play Alf Garnett's wife in To Death Us Do Part with Warren Mitchell. So in this one, Forrest Tucker plays Gil Graham, an American scientist who's come over and is working on these magnetic field things. And they're finding odd properties of these magnetic fields. They're working mostly with metallurgy. So they found a way for these magnetic fields to make iron and steel flexible like rubber, and also under different circumstances. It enables them to take a piece of alloy from an aircraft hull and crumble it like it's made out of biscuits. So there's a lot of stuff going on at this lab. And meanwhile, the bureaucrats in London are worried this has cost £500,000 and they haven't seen a result. And there's a nice little bit in this movie where the argument is made for pure scientific research. One of the people in charge of the project actually makes that argument in a very brief and cogent way. And it's an argument that we're still having fights about now. Is pure research following a lead and not necessarily having a destination? Is that a valid way of conducting scientific research and spending money? And the logical argument, of course, is yes. Interesting things happen. It's how we discovered weird stuff like Velcro and Wi-Fi and all sorts of other things were discovered just by serendipitous messing around with pure research. So weird things start happening, the storms start happening, and probably the worst effect that happens is that the TV blows in the pub down the road, and all the people in the pub are really pissed off by this. And it's also stopping the clocks in the pub, so the publican doesn't know when he needs to close up the pub because pub licensing hours were a big thing in those days. And the local copper calls him on it because the clock has stopped. So it causes enormous social disruption to the social hub of the local village. There are all sorts of other things that happen. There's a little girl who's very interested in bugs and insects who finds an insect egg this big. And the female scientist, her name is Michelle Dupont, tells the little girl's mother to boil the egg, otherwise a giant insect is going to hatch from it. So she ends up getting her biggest pot and boiling this giant insect egg. Not sure whether it would make good sandwiches or not, but I wouldn't risk it. So there's little bits of business like that all the way through this movie that make it kind of interesting. And there's a local tramp, an unhoused person, who gets hit by the radiation that comes in because of the messing around with Earth's magnetic field, who gets disfigured on one side of his face and becomes a homicidal maniac. And then we get giant insects. And the giant insects in this movie are not done well. Fortunately, they do the right thing and cut away from them pretty quickly. They just flash you over to where the insects are for a moment, and then back to the people screaming and yelling because they don't look great. This movie was not made on a large budget, so it doesn't have the ability to do things really well. And so they have a photo of the pub or a photo of a little village cottage, and then they'll put a grasshopper in front of it and just flash over there for a moment. Then flash back to Gabby Andre screaming and falling into a giant spider web. That kind of stuff happens. And it kind of works. I like the fact that what they've done is chucked 55 different science fiction concepts into a blender and mixed them all up and made a movie out of them. And then you get Mr. Smith, a character who turns up in the local village, played by Alec Mango, who is an alien from outer space, a benign alien who wants to tell these scientists, stop pissing around with magnetic fields. You're going to screw things up. You're messing around with our UFOs and you're making them crash. And you're also going to destroy the human race as a side issue to that. So you've got an alien comes in, and not a nasty alien, but a benign one who's kind of going, no, you don't want to do that. You know, put down that plutonium and wash your hands kind of an approach to the scientists. It makes it a very weird movie. It doesn't follow a lot of the tropes of a science fiction movie. The alien isn't preachy. He's just kind of saying, this is dangerous. He's almost like a galactic health and safety inspector. And I like that idea. That approach works well. And of course, you got the unusual love triangle between two of the scientists and the pretty French lady who comes in. And before the pretty French lady comes in, there's a lot of very sexist speculation about female scientists that the boy scientists share. Though, to be fair, Gil Graham, the scientist played by Forrest Tucker, apologises for being an idiot about the things he says. So, him having the ability to take ownership of his stupidity gives him extra brownie points. In the end, the alien saves the day and does everything right. One of the other scientists, Dr. Laird, goes crazy and decides, in spite of all the risks, he's going to mess around with the magnetic fields and change the experiment and do the thing that the alien says not to do and destroy the world. So the alien pulls out a little alien sidearm and blows up the lab. The end. I kind of like this movie. I like that chucking everything into the pot and boiling it up, including the giant insect egg approach to science fiction. Everything that can go wrong with this experiment does go wrong. People get mutated by it. People get attacked by giant insects. There are storms in the air, violent storms in the area. There's radiation problems. There's giant insects and just everything that these people had seen in a previous science fiction movie gets thrown into this. I like it. It just works. It previously had been a made-for-TV serial, just like the Abominable Snowman had been. And, of course, it hasn't survived because a lot of these things got destroyed at the time. But the mad soup of a movie kind of works, and I like it, and it was a bit of fun to watch it. Don't go in there expecting a lot of scientific plausibility, but you do get serious scientists doing serious scientific things. Even the bureaucrats who are worried about the budget are people of logic and are people of reason. There aren't a lot of cliched characters in this, which is surprising. So you might want to check out Cosmic Monsters, also known as The Strange World of Planet X. I think it's got a little bit going for it. I'd never seen it before, but I enjoyed it watching it this time around. So that's what I got for you this time around. A couple of movies starring Forrest Tucker, which turned out to be better than I thought they'd be, and turned out to be just a little bit different from many of the other movies that were being made at the time. They weren't successful, they weren't big budget films, but they're fun. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, let me know if you've seen these movies and whether you like them or not, or whether you want to see them. You can also support the channel by becoming a patron or becoming a channel member. And if you want to be a patron, you can go to patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. You can also hit the notification bell and find out when new videos are coming up. Next up on Monday, we've got the live stream again, and I'm going to spend the whole weekend figuring out what I'm going to do for that. And by the way, on Wednesday, I've got the new releases from Umbrella Entertainment, and there's some really interesting genre films in here. There's science fiction, there's horror from New Zealand, there's a biopic, which I hadn't seen, but I was kind of interested in seeing. A lot of good stuff there, so I'll be doing those on Wednesday. So until all of that happens, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Dig as deep as you can into old science fiction movies. Occasionally, you get something really nourishing. And I'll catch you next time.